Hello future me, so today I'm going to make some earrings. I went online to Beads Direct because I was looking for some stud earring backs that I could use to glue on other pieces that I've made, and I filled up my cart. It was getting pretty late at night and I hadn't finished looking through all the things that I wanted to, so I decided I would leave the cart there, sleep on it and come back the next day. I didn't remember until very late the next day that I had things in the cart, so by the time I got back to it everything had disappeared from it. And then when I went to look for these little earring backs, they were all sold out. So instead I picked up a few pairs of these. These are, I believe, referred to as kidney ear wires, and they have that kind of fancy look, you know, or at least I think they do. So yeah, there's like a certain kind of aesthetic attached to these kinds of ear wires, and they always like rose gold, peonies, white marble, fonts with serifs on them. You know, there's a certain kind of look when you see earrings that look like this. Nothing wrong with that aesthetic, but there is a certain aesthetic that goes along with ear wires that like these. So I thought I would go in a totally different direction and make something that doesn't follow that aesthetic. At the same time, I picked up these beads. They are size 11 beads. Size 11 round beads, and the colour is sour apple. So when I saw these on the website, one thing came to mind, and I'm hoping you're thinking the same thing as me. So when I see that colour, I always think of old 90s Nickelodeon get your own back green gunge. So I'm going to make some earrings with a little beaded gunge splatters on them. I should probably point out that I'm not at all affiliated with Beads Direct. They just show up in Google when I look for bead stuff. So I'm going to be using some beading foundation, but obviously I'm not going to rip into this brand new sheet because I've got a few little bits of it left that I should use up first. I don't want to be wasteful. Then I'm gonna do some beading. So I have been deciding what the splatter should look like. The first one I did was this one with the 2 little drips. I decided on the second one, where I did 3, that I wanted 3 obviously, and if I'd thought about this and planned ahead, I would have bought perhaps a little chain so that I could create a separate drop. The deciding factors would be this, I guess, negative space between the droplets, because the way I'm planning on adding a border would mean adding an extra bit of bulk around the edge of the design. So I need a decent enough space between droplets in order to have enough room for this border. I automatically want to go with this one. I think it looks the best. I like the oval shape of the main bit. Then I like how these are all 3 different lengths, but they're not so obviously different like these 3 were. Now I'm looking at them too long and I can just see a face here now. So next step will be to cut out this one so then I can use it as my template. So now I have my template. The plan is to have these 2 earrings mirror each other, so for one side it'll be obviously this side up, and then the other side I'll flip it over and it'll be this side up. Just going to use a green pen These are Pilot friction pens. I'm going to use the green one because obviously the gunge is going to be green, so if it shows up then it doesn't matter too much, or if it bothers me then I can use my embossing heat gun or use a hairdryer to make the ink disappear. So I have my little dish. These triangle dishes are perfect for pouring your beads into. Then once you're done, they've got an easy spout on every corner to pour your beads back into their container. This is going to be the bulk of the splotch, and then that's going to be the border. So I made a massive error in my last order to this website in that I didn't replenish my needle supply. So I only have 2 needles left. I'm going to show both of them to you because they're different kinds of needles. Oh, this one's bent. So it's basically got a really big eye, really easy to thread because of that really big eye. Then I have this kind of needle. I don't know if you can see right at this very tip here. It has a very, very small eye, but the needle itself is really small and really quite sturdy, and it'll only bend if you try and force it through way too thick of a piece of fabric or too many layers of fabric. So I forgot to mention I'm using white nylon thread. Tie a knot in it. I forgot to do this at this point. I didn't remember that you don't have to disguise knots when you're doing beadwork on beading foundation. It's thick enough that it hides the knots for you. So yeah, remember to add a knot into your thread before you start sewing. So then I used the needles to pick up a couple beads and brought them all the way down to the base of the thread, and I lined them up using the needle, helping to make sure that they were in place. Then I inserted the needle down immediately next to the 2 beads and brought it back up in between them. So you've got bead 1 and bead 2, and then in the middle of those bring the needle back up, and then you'll put the needle through bead 2 again, so then it lies nice and flat for the next 2 beads. And I'll show you again how I do it in this angle, and then we'll move to another angle so you get a better view. I learned how to do this through watching some videos from the YouTube channel Beadaholic. They also sell beading supplies, so I would recommend checking their channel out for a better demonstration than what I'm doing. And here's a close-up view, picking up the 2 beads. There is a bit of a negative space where I'm working on, which I do change later. I pull all this out and change that, so ignore me not filling in my design properly. But yeah, the beads get placed down next to the previously placed beads. The needle goes through the fabric, then back up between the middle of the 2, then the needle gets threaded through that second bead. So after I was done, I have 2 gunge splotches done. I just need to cut around them and leave enough of a gap that I can sew into that border, but also not so much that the border is too visible later on. I actually had to switch scissors because I found that even though I had these really small scissors, they could not get that gap in the middle. So I moved to even smaller embroidery scissors, which I shouldn't have used. Those are only used to snip threads, but they're they're the smallest scissors I had, so I just used them. Now I've cut them out, and next up I need to figure out how I'm going to back these. So I have something called ultra suede. It's like a faux suede, non-woven fabric. It doesn't fray when you cut it out. You just glue the piece on there, cut out that shape, and then you're able to sew a border bead around it. But I only have it in this really pale pink colour. I didn't want to buy anything new because I had already bought like all new supplies for this project. I also had some like stretchy faux leather fabric, but it is in brown and that doesn't go with it either. But I decided ultimately to create 2 more and have double-sided earrings. So I'm just checking that they line up nicely. there before I move on to adding a border. So when it comes to doing a border, I only want to pick up one bead at a time. I pick up the bead before putting the needle through the two pieces. You're not going to tie a knot in the thread when you're doing a border stitch, because you want to leave about 6 inches at the end of the thread, so that when you go to finish the piece, you're able to thread the needle back onto that tail of the thread, and you use it to sew the border into the stitches, which I'll show you later on. So we take the needle and put it through, and before we get all the way to the end, we're going to thread the needle back through the bead. We're going to hold on to that tail, and then we're just going to repeat that process again, where we pick a bead up, put the needle through the pieces, and then thread that needle back through the bead. So I add the last bead on. Once we're done, we're going to use those tails at the ends to sew up the gap and make sure you can't see where it starts and ends. And then I'm going to take the needle and pull it through that first bead that we sewed in place, pulling the tail out of the way to make sure it doesn't get caught up. I'm going to pull it really tight, and we're just going to end up weaving the needle through both the fabric and then also the beads that are sewn in place. I tend to weave through maybe 3 or 4 beads overlapping at the beginning. And then I push the needle through the piece in order to hide the tail and snip off that end. It can be a little bit difficult to do this because of all of the beads in the way. The needle can be really small, so I used a thimble to push it through a bit, and then some tweezers. You could use some flat nose pliers, anything that won't damage the needle too much to pull it through. And then I thread the needle onto the tail end that we had left at the beginning and weave the needle through 3 or 4 beads in the other direction before doing the same thing, pushing it through the piece and cutting off the end. Of course, you don't have to do a gunge splotch using these techniques. Use them to make any shape you want. Maybe start with something simple that doesn't have those drips that you have to sew around. And here are the earrings. I couldn't decide what to do in how to attach them to the ear wires, so I've basically just threaded it through the border beads, but I think they look pretty cute. Let's put them on. Not too bad. I also made some bigger versions. They're kind of quirky. Oh yeah, I'm really glad that I went with double-sided for these, just because I really like the colour, and it also adds a bit of sturdiness to them. I backed these ones with regular old craft felt, and they're a bit too malleable. I could have bordered the edges with a bit of wire or added a bit of interfacing that could have worked, or even bought some felt stiffener or PVA glue. I think that works as a felt stiffener. Either way, I think they're cute, and that's good enough for me. Oh, my fringe really needs a cut. Can we get them both through? Yes, we can. Joys of being a former emo kid with stretched lobes. So I used the sour apple colour on the big ones. That's an opaque bead. It came in 10-gram packs from Beads Direct. Ended up going through a pack and a half, so I used probably 15 grams for both earrings. I definitely underestimated the amount of beads needed for something as big as this, but I didn't realise how much I liked really big earrings on me. And I also have ideas for other earrings, mostly Halloween kind of earrings, which means I've got a lot of work to do before the end of this month. And then for the little ones, I used lime green frosted transparent for the middle bit, and then around the edge I used transparent lime green beads, the glossy kinds. I think I prefer the colour of these little ones, just it looks brighter, but I feel like the opaque sour apple colour is probably a more realistic a realistic gunge colour. Super gunge ears. So future me, I hope you learned something, and everyone else, I hope you learned something new, and thank you for watching. Bye! You can't see the green in my eyeshadow. That's disappointing, considering how long it took me to put it on.